Hello everyone, this is Lorianne Smith and I'm doing another audio with photos. This is really special to me. This is in honor of my husband, Cecil George Tornerup, who passed away August the 4th, 2018. So this would be the 4th anniversary of him leaving me to go to heaven. And I just thought I'd do just a little chat about who he was and what he meant to my life. I've talked about him quite a bit on my videos and audios that I've done, and he was a huge part of my healing journey. But he was just such a wonderful man, and I loved him dearly. I'm terribly sad without him. But this is life, right? None of us get to stay here. And so he had to go, and it was time for him to go. He was very, very sick, and but I thought I'd just talk about him and our life together, and just in honor of his memory. And there's a lot of people who will listen to this actually know Cecil personally, and so I think this will be nice for them too. And I did talk about Cecil when we met in my Born in Hell video series that I did, where I went through all the different ages chronologically of my life growing up abused. And when it got to the part where I met Cecil, left the States for Canada and met Cecil, I went into detail about how we met and just what it meant to me to have him in my life. I needed somebody, and I latched on to him. He needed somebody, he latched on to me. It just was I believe it was meant to be. And so the circumstances surrounding how we met is a little bit bizarre. So that's why I think it'd be great to sort of elaborate a little bit on that. And just, for people who are interested in my story. He didn't do any of my video work with me or audio work. He kept his life very private. I kept mine out in public. And and once in a while you could hear his voice on the videos I was doing, or audios. He'd be talking in the background a little bit, saying goodnight or whatever he was doing. But he didn't want to be. That was my thing. It wasn't his thing, and he just let me do it. He was a huge part of my healing journey, like I said. And he didn't mind that I was doing all that. He was very happy for me because he knew, he'd be listening while I was talking. And he knew what I went through when I wrote the books. He knew previously because I had to fill him in, like I said. And so, it's not like he didn't know, but he was very happy for me that I was able to do some healing and start feeling better about myself and about life. And I think he was just happy for me. He's a good man. And I mean, nobody's perfect. No, I'm not perfect. He wasn't perfect, and nobody is on this earth. And but overall, he had a really good heart, and I knew that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been with him. He had his head on really straight. Like for a regular guy, he really knew who he was. He was okay with himself. He had some things in his life that he was sad about, things that he really couldn't, fix, and he just accepted them. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But it was so yeah. If you wanted to listen to that video about the impact of meeting him and that sort of thing, dealing with the sexual abuse and whatnot that I suffered as a child, that's that video from 30 years old, I believe, 29, 30, somewhere in there. That's the one I'm talking about. Cecil's in that. So that's the Born in Hell series videos, if you're interested in that, because I'm not so much going to go into too many of the same details. Yeah, I left Canada. I left the States for Canada at the age of 29, and I was just coming up because I wanted to first of all, get away from my abuser parents. I had been hanging around down there and staying with them. Really thought I was helping my mother by being there because I was always a buffer between my parents. When my older siblings moved out, it was then my job to keep the peace in the house and try to keep my mom from, having a heart attack or a stroke or something, or try to keep my dad from hurting my mother, and especially from raping her at night. He was still trying to do that, so I stayed with him. And at the age of 29, I went into detail about why I left. And the situation around that in the Born in Hell video series. I talked about all of that stuff, so I'm not going to really repeat all that. But I decided I needed to get out of there, and I felt that I needed to go north. I was already a dual citizen between Canada and the States because my parents never gave up their green cards. They had green cards, so they were not U.S. citizens. They were just landed immigrants or whatever, and they never gave up their Canadian status. So I actually, because of that, I was born in the States, but because of that, I have dual citizenship with Canada. So I thought, I should go to Canada. My brother's up there. And at this time, he's the only one living now, the only brother living, Kevin. He was 16 years older than me. And him and his wife were living in central Alberta, and a small town. And I thought, I could go visit with him for a little while, look for a job, and then get settled somewhere. That was my idea, and I thought, if it didn't work out, I'd stay, a year or two, give it a try. I could always go somewhere else. I'm thinking I could always come back to the States, or I could go anywhere, anywhere I decided I wanted to go. So I thought I'll give it a shot, so I came up with just like a sleeping bag, a duffel bag, a pillow, a winter coat, that kind of stuff. I didn't have a lot with me, and I didn't have much money. I had like $700 in my pocket, and not really enough to get started up here. But I was determined. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get a job, and I'll start working, and I'll get a little place, or whatever the situation is. So I went and stayed with my bro and his wife at their place, and for about 3 weeks. And I was perusing the newspaper, of course, for central Alberta and for the bigger cities in Alberta, Edmonton and Calgary. And there was this job that was, they needed a cook's helper for CP Rail. And it was a company that would actually go out and cook for the guys that fix the tracks, the railroad ties, the tie gang they call them. And they're on the train, they live on the train for weeks at a time, and then they take shifts, and some will go home and some will stay, and then the other ones will come back, the other ones will go home, and the cooks have to be there to cook for these guys. And they clean their own rooms and stuff like that, so I didn't have to do any of that, but it was my job to help the main cook. So that's what I was going to be doing, kind of like almost like a runner, like a salad person, helping with sandwiches, not the main cook, but just helping out. I thought that'd be great. I'd love to do something like that because I'd get to see Alberta and be on the train. And I thought, that's adventurous. I'd love to do it. The pay was really good. And so I applied for it. And I had to go to Calgary for an interview. So I left that small town. I took a bus and came to Calgary for an interview. I had never been here, really. I had been here before for my brother's funeral, but that's it. I didn't really know the city that well. And I had that interview. And the guy's like, I'll give you a chance. And because I had cooking skills, I was kind of like a red seal, right? Because I'd gone to cooking school. He says, I'll give you a shot. And I said, oh, awesome, and he's like, yeah, you can go out and here's what you got to do. So I had to go meet the train in a small little rural area. So I went back to my sister-in-law, my brother's place. And within a week, they had to drive me to this location where the train was. And I got the job. So I'm there, and I met Cecil there. And he was the cook and the head guy. So he had been doing this before, but he didn't want to take this job. I had found out from him later as we were talking about it. It's pretty odd how we met because, I just came up and got this job, and he was gonna turn the job down because he wanted to go north. He wanted to do camp stuff in oil, drilling and stuff like that. He wanted to do the camp rigs instead of this train thing. But the guy was telling him, please, please, we don't have anybody to do this, to run the show here. And we need you for this one anyway. Just do this one more for us. And he's like, okay. So he said he would. And he did. And so, we met. That's how we met. It was just the most bizarre situation. It was a wonderful time for me because I was free of my abusers. I thought I was free from my past. I was like on a new adventure. I was feeling pretty good, but I was certainly lonely. I wasn't really looking for a one-night stand, but I was looking for a friend, and I was looking for somebody who would care about me. You know what I mean? I was not doing well as an adult survivor of abuse, right? So I didn't want to get really hooked into some relationship that was going to be horrible either, right? So I was very leery. But the minute I saw him, something about him just struck me. He was friendly. He seemed genuine. He sat and talked to me about the job because the other guy had to leave, so he was filling me in about the job. Cecil was. He was telling me what my job role would be, and he took me and gave me a tour of all the kitchen and all the, the storage cars and our place where we would be staying. We all had our own rooms, so, we had our own car. So the rooms were bigger than the other guys. They had to share. All the guys working on the train. We had our own rooms, and he had the big room because he's the big chef. And I had a smaller room, and then the other guy, there was another helper guy who had a sort of same size room as I did. And these rooms were all private. We had locks on the doors. It was just like a tiny little one-room apartment type thing on the train. So it was really trippy. But I trusted these guys. They seemed very nice. I trusted the fact that Cecil said they had women on the train before, not to worry. I wasn't the only woman that had ever done this job. He said, don't worry, you're safe here, He says, nobody here is going to bother you, and you can feel safe. And, because they're used to seeing women on these trains doing this job, right? I'm like, oh, okay. Because I was a little nervous. And he's like, no, you just relax. We're going to have a good time. He says, I'll show you how to do everything. And he seemed to be just such a genuine person to me. Right off the bat. And when they say, is there such a thing as love at first sight, there really is, because when I saw him, I was instantly attracted to him. It was an instant thing. Like the minute I saw him come on the train and talk to that guy before the lead guy, the head guy left, the manager, he was, it was instantly attracted to this man. And he was good looking. He was very tall and very good looking. He was 6'2", and very strong, dark hair, beautiful eyes, and very handsome. I had no idea how old he was. I knew he was older than me, but I wasn't sure how much older, because he didn't look all that old. And he just was very friendly. So we sat and talked and we laughed. He would joke around, and the first few days we were just getting set up to start this train run, and we had to get all the groceries and everything in, and because their season was starting or whatever, right? And so then here comes the guys, and we just start working. So we started working together, and within a few weeks, we don't have much time off, because when we're on the train, we're working 4-hour shifts around the clock. So I would work 4 hours on, be off 4 hours, on 4 hours, off 4 hours for 10 days in a row, and then we'd get 4 days off. And then, so you're pretty tired by the time you get your days off, because you've been doing these weird shifts and working around the clock like that. So we didn't match up, because when he was working, I was off. When I was working, he was off, because that way the cooks all get a break and get to have a sleep, because you only get 4 hours, right? So it was odd. It was very strange, but I was having fun. It was summertime. I was enjoying it. It was, springtime, but it was heading to summer, and the weather was beautiful. And we were out in these remote areas in the middle of Alberta where cars don't go. It's the train tracks, right? So, you're out in the middle of this beautiful scenery with, deer and elk and all sorts of wildlife, and tall grass and beautiful mountain trees, and it was just absolutely beautiful. And because Alberta is a very beautiful province, and so I was thoroughly enjoying myself, and also falling in love with Cecil George Turner. And I kind of knew, I really felt attracted to him, and I kind of thought, he's the one. And I'm going to see if he's interested. I'm going to be brave because he's not making any moves. He was very much a gentleman, and he wasn't going to he wasn't going to try to make a move. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be brave, and I was, and I kind of let him know, that I liked him. And I knew he liked certain music, so I would play this music kind of loud so he could hear it. And I actually seduced him by these songs that I played, which I thought was hilarious. And I said no, and he said, "Oh yeah, you seduced me." I'm like, no, but he's just funny, and he had a great sense of humor. But we used to play cards, and just different card cribbage. Yeah, played Yahtzee. We just played games like that, and we just talk. And we just hit it off. Same kind of people, same type of attitude towards life. And it was interesting. It was just so bizarre. I just met my soulmate, coming up from the States. Had no idea. I just get this job, and he had no idea. He didn't want to take the job. And then, he was really thankful. We were both thankful that he did, and I was thankful too. So yeah, one night, he after me kind of throwing, some hints at him that I was really interested in him, he knocked on my little cabin door, and I knew it was him, So I opened the door, and he's like, well, I'd like to see you. And he said, if you want to, be boyfriend girlfriend, and I'd like to kiss you. And I was like, right on, dude, let's go. So we hit it off big time. I was heading to 30. He was heading to 50, but I had no idea. I thought he was about 40. I thought he might be 10 years older than me, but not 20. He looked very young, and his mannerisms were very young. And I'm, of course, an old soul. Grew up, abused, and, I'm kind of older, maybe in not so much looks, but in my attitude. So we actually met up in the middle. When I was about 30, I was really about 40, and when he was 50, he was really about 40, because his attitude towards life was so much younger than mine. He wasn't abused as a child, and he had a kind of a younger outlook on life. Like he loved life. Life to him, he was very happy to be alive, and even though he had experienced sadness in his life like everybody else, and different traumas and things like that, he didn't grow up abused, so he knew his parents loved him. They wanted him. They wanted all their children. They loved their children. So he didn't grow up in the same way that I did, with a jaded sort of look on life. He was previously married to a woman in England, and he had left her in the 80s, so he hadn't seen them for, like, I moved up here in 95, so he hadn't seen them for about 10 years, or even more. He had 2 boys. One of them was 4 years old when he left, and the other one wasn't even born yet when he left. So he left his wife and considered her to be an ex-wife. They separated, never saw her again for many, many years. Actually, I don't think he ever saw her again. He said he never saw her again since the 80s. So, and so I figured he was divorced, and I was like, oh, that's too bad, but, and I said, if you ever, because we weren't we weren't attached, we weren't married. I said, if you ever feel like you want to go back to her, I'd understand. The door would be open. You could go, because you've got children, you've got boys, right? And he's like, no, it's over between us. It was over back then. It's still over, and I love you, right? And I was like, well, okay. I'm just letting you know, because I didn't want to hold him back from anything, and I didn't want to hold somebody in a relationship, just because I love them, right? That's not the right thing to do. I wanted him to love me and stay in the relationship because he loved me, and he did. And we had 26, 27 years together, and no, 23 years, because I was 1995, that's when I came up here, and he passed away in 2018. So I can't even add anymore. But anyway, whatever that would be. So, oh, and I'm extremely tired. Like, I didn't get any sleep last night at all. I got about 4 hours from 5 o'clock this morning to about 9, so I'm a little bit tired, but I really wanted to do this this presentation for Cecil. So we met, and we both got injured on the train, and we had to get off the train. I had tendonitis in my wrist, and I couldn't, like, the pain was so incredibly bad I couldn't even get dressed. I couldn't pull my shirt on, I couldn't put my pants on, I couldn't do anything with this wrist. It was so painful. It was bent down and in a wrong angle, and it was really screwed up, so I couldn't use it. So he had hurt himself lugging groceries from a truck that couldn't get to the train. So it was parked across a grassy sort of a valley, and he had to go up and down this valley dragging these groceries because the semi truck couldn't get anywhere closer to the train, which was really ridiculous that the conductor engineer guy parked it like that. But what can you do? So he ended up hurting himself and pulling like doing something to his groin, and a hernia. That's what it was. So he was bleeding, like, internally, poor guy. And this was within 3 months. I mean, after we're on the train. So we have to get off the train. We're both injured the same week, which is just bizarre but true. So we got the engineer guy to get us to make a phone call to the boss and say, look, we need a replacement. We need two, actually. We both have to get off the train, and we need a rental car. So we were at this small town and in this rural area, and the conductor guy had to go into Edmonton, which was a few hours away, pick up this rental car, bring it back, and so that we could take it and go. Right? It was unbelievable. So we took off in this rental car with our stuff, headed to Edmonton, not knowing what we're going to do because we both have to go to the hospital. So we go to the hospital, and we're like, oh, you're going to have to get a room, so we're going to have to get a hotel room anyway. But first we went to the hospital, and he wasn't going to be able to have surgery for 6 months, they said, so because it was just a waiting list. And so, they gave him some pain meds and stuff. And then for me, they pulled my arm back and bandaged it and gave me some pain pills too, and said, well, you're just going to have to wear a soft cast for however, I don't forget, a couple months or whatever. So, you're going to have to be on EI, right? Or workman's comp, whatever. So it was just really sad that this happened, because I was making really good money out there, and he was making better money than me, and the two of us were raking in the bucks. So all of a sudden it's like, okay, no job, and we're like, great, okay. So we decide, well, he doesn't have a house. He was staying with his sister, so in a small town north of there. So we're like, we're in Edmonton, Alberta. So we're like, let's just get a hotel for a month. He says, let's just get a hotel for a month. I mean, he says, I don't want to go back to my sister's. I don't know about you. I said, well, I don't want to go to my brother's. I'm not really welcome there anyway. For a long stay. They let me stay for 3 weeks, but I don't think they want me hanging around. So, yeah, let's get a hotel room. So we got a hotel room, and we had already been seeing each other by this point. So it was fine, and we just really enjoyed each other's company. He was in a lot of pain, but I was in a lot of pain, but we just took it easy, and we had to take the rental car back, so we didn't have a car. So we would just walk around. We were close to the hospital there, and we just walk around and sightsee Edmonton. He had already been to Edmonton many times, probably spent years wandering around there. For me, it was a new experience, so it was fun, and we didn't have much money because we didn't want to use all of our savings, but we just had to be careful with our cash. But we were staying in this hotel, and I mean, he knew about some of the abuse because I had to fill him in because, I've talked about all that on my Born in Hell video series with the CSA child sexual abuse, and, the issues surrounding that as an adult survivor of child rape, right? So, he knew I had problems, and, he was okay with dealing with me. He was very gentle. He was very calming for me. He just cared about me. That's all there was to it. He was just a good man. Like I said, it's not very often you find somebody that's actually cares about you and really wants the best for you and doesn't want to hurt you, and I think that's just wonderful. So I hung on to him with everything I had. He's a good dude, and so we were in this hotel and we're sleeping, and he's on meds. I'm on meds for my wrist, right? And he's on heavy meds. I'm on light meds, and because he's got internal bleeding, but I had a nightmare, and I'll tell you about this nightmare because I remember it. It was bizarre. This is going back many years. This is probably from when I was about 12 years old, 12 and a half, somewhere in there. And we were over at a friend's, or these people that were friends of my mom's and dad's, is really what it was. Their friend's house. These people were younger than them. They were actually my sister's age. They were friends of my sister's, really, but also friends of my mom because they loved my mom. And well, my mom didn't beat on them or call them names, throw them out of the house, break their head open, stuff like that. So, they love my mom. And so the issue is we were over there one day, and there was somebody else coming to the house to visit at the same time. And it was a friend of theirs who had adopted this Native American girl, and she was bringing her to meet everybody for the first time. And this girl was Native American, and she was younger, than us. I think I think I was 12 and a half, or 12, so she was, I'd say about 7 or 8. And they said that she had been abused on the reservation, and because they thought she was a witch, so these people who, the parents or whoever these people were, had severely abused her. I mean horrifically. Like they scarred her, they burned her, they sexually mutilated her, they sexually abused her. I mean, they just really trashed her body. They hung her upside down, were beating on her. They were just basically trying to kill her, is what they were trying to do, but she was saved somehow. And this woman had adopted her, it wasn't even a foster care situation, it was a final adoption. So she was adopting this girl. I can't remember her name, it's too bad. But she was mentally handicapped probably from birth. But the thing is that's not, you don't treat a child like that, ever, see? Not ever. And I mean, I've seen some horrific stuff in my lifetime. It's kind of bizarre how somebody, that's probably why I fight so hard against child abuse and fight so hard to stop it, because I've seen so many horrible things myself with my own eyes that I'm kind of like, this has got to stop, folks. Not only am I a survivor, but I've seen other people in other situations where children have been abused, and I'm just like, this has got to stop. Anyway, she brought this girl in and introduced her, and my mom was like, now you all, you be good to her, she's been abused. And my mom acted like she just had such a heart and a soft spot for a child who's been abused. I mean, after doing what she did to me and all of her children, my mind flipped, because I thought, you care about this little Native American girl who's been abused, but you don't care, you don't think what you're doing to me is abuse. I didn't say that to her. She would have beat me up. I was thinking this in my mind. I'm like, that's bizarre. I mean, I knew my mom was abused herself as a child and was always crying the blues about her siblings being abused by my grandmother, her mother, and then for her to do what she did to us, which she thought was what we just deserved, burning me and trying to put me in the oven and stuff, and just beating me horrifically. Not okay. So, and calling me names, like the most horrible things, saying she could kill me, it was her right to kill me. And all this stuff is running through my mind, and I'm thinking, she wants me, she's now feeling sorry for this, which was appropriate, to feel bad for this little Native American girl. I did. I mean, my heart just broke when I heard about that, and then I met her, and I almost couldn't even look at her because my heart was so broken. I didn't even know what to say. And I was just a little girl. But the thing is a young girl. And, but yeah, I mean, we were all nice to her, but the whole thing is that stayed with me, and I didn't really realize it. And, in Edmonton, when we were sleeping there, I was on pills, and my wrist was hurting. And I must have been sleeping on my wrist, wrong or something, because it was really hurting, and I was dreaming of being abused. And I was having a nightmare of my mom abusing me, and then saying to me, you have to be good to that little girl because she was abused. And I woke up yelling and screaming, "My mom abused me! My mom abused me!" And Cecil was like, "What the hell?" He woke up and he's like, "Oh, here, calm down," because I was just shrieking, like screaming and crying my eyes out, like bawling my face off. Just, I couldn't even stop crying. That's the first time I acknowledged to myself that my mom abused me. And I was not even 30 years old, just turning 30. And Cecil was just like holding me, and it was so good to have somebody not say anything, but just hold me and just allow me to cry and just allow me to, you know, sob and wail and whatever I needed to do. And that's what he was. That's what he did for me the whole entire time. And, you know, he knew I had nightmares. He's like, you know, he's like, sleeping with you is like having a war. He's like, it's like you're having a war at night. Like, he says, it's like a war zone in the bed there. He says, I gotta guard myself, you know, because you're kicking and you're punching and you're trying to get away and you're struggling. And he says, it's like a war zone with you in the bed. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And he's like, well, and he says, you're always trying to cover me, like you're trying to, you know, you like tuck me in all the blankets all the way around me, and I'm too hot. And then every time I take the blankets off, you go and you put them and you tuck them in around me like you're protecting me or something. And I'm like, that's bizarre, because that's what I used to do. I used to roll myself up in my blankets so that my brother wouldn't so I could try to stop my brother from raping me. And so that's why I do that, right? So, you know, he was well aware of the horrible stuff, the leftovers of what that abuse did to me. And it's like, you know, he was very patient, and he just tried. He didn't ever try to be like, you know, the answer to my problems. What he really was he was like my shoulder to lean on, like he was the ear to listen. He listened to me talk about my stuff. He was there just to hold me and to be with me. He never, you know, tried to offer any kind of advice, because, you know, he didn't know what to tell me I should do. He was just there for me. And it's so rare when you find some people in your life that are just there for you. Of course you hang on to these people with everything you have. And I mean, like I said, I've been so blessed to have really great friends over the years, and wonderful people in my life who are my friends, right? And I'm so thankful. And like Cecil, I mean, he was my best friend. He knew me. He obviously living with me and being my husband. You know, he knew me like nobody else would. But I also have other friends who also know me very, very well, and there's a few of them that know me, know my heart, and it's very nice to know that there's somebody on the planet that knows who you are and actually appreciates you for who you are. And I think that's wonderful. I wish that for everybody. You know, he was such a good man. And so, yeah, I mean, I'd wake up crying in the middle of the night and screaming and, you know, dreaming of the abuse, not just from my brother, but from my mother as well, and my dad. And he would just hold me, you know, and this is what he did for me. And you know, 6 years into the relationship, I mean, I was working, he was working. He used to work up north, and we actually, well, what happened was we ended up getting a small apartment in Edmonton because the surgery was going to take 6 months for him, and for me, I was just after 2 months going to go look for work, right? And so we decided to get a apartment. It was furnished, and it was a nice little apartment. In the meantime, I got pregnant, and because we weren't using anything, because I didn't think that I could become pregnant. I had been told by gynecologists when I had a checkup when I was 20 that I would never be able to have children, and that for me to get pregnant would be a miracle. But they said, you know, you could be on the pill just in case, if you don't, you know, just to be on the safe side if you really want to. But, you know, we seriously don't think it's going to happen for you, unfortunately. Because of the CSA child sexual abuse you suffered, you know, there's too much damage. It's not going to happen, right? Without reconstructive surgery, it's impossible. I'm like, well, Never mind that. I was at the time I wasn't dealing with any of that stuff, right? My heart was broken, but um, I thought I couldn't get pregnant. See, so I did. I ended up getting pregnant. I was very happy about it because I was like, this is a miracle from God. I was like, hallelujah. I mean, at the time I really wasn't all that spiritual, but I was still thanking God, and I was thinking, this is wonderful, because I thought I could never have children. See. So I wanted this baby. Cecil, on the other hand, was like, oh my God, I'm almost 50. I really don't want to do children. But he was okay with it. You know what I mean? He wasn't like, oh, well, you have to, I'm leaving if you have this child, or, he wasn't like that. He was just a little bit like, oh no. And I'm thinking, this is wonderful. I told him, I said, hey, if you don't want to do children, I'm not aborting this baby. I said, I thought I couldn't get pregnant, and so I'm so thankful and so happy to be able to say that I'm now a mother. I'll do anything to look after this child. You don't have to stick around. I mean, if you don't want to do this with me, that's fine. But I'm not aborting the child, and I'm not giving it up. I will raise this child, and I'm going to love this baby. That's what I told him. I said, I'm going to love this baby, and I'm going to treat this baby like this baby's the most precious baby in the whole entire world. This baby's going to know love, and that's it. And he was like, I'm in. So I was so happy about being pregnant. And in January, I was about halfway through my pregnancy, and in January he had to go to up north to go back to work. He was cleared to go back to work because he finally had that surgery, was healed up, and heading to work. So he was way up north, like in the Yukon, in the middle of nowhere. And I started spotting. I think it was New Year's Eve or something. And I called the hospital people for, emergency. I said, look, I'm spotting. They were like, well, it could be nothing. So, don't panic. If it gets worse, come in, right? Well, it got worse. And I mean, it got worse fast. I was in labor and aborting the baby, right there. I mean, it was absolutely horrific. So I was about halfway, half term, 4.5 months pregnant. And so I lost the baby, and I was just devastated, and I wasn't prepared. I had no family there in Edmonton. Didn't know anybody. Cecil was up north. I didn't even have health insurance at this time because I wasn't living in Canada for a year at that point. You have to live in Canada for a year to be able to get it. So I thought, I can't even afford to go to the doctor. You know what I mean? So I just stayed there. I mean, I phoned Cecil and I told him, I'm losing the baby. I said, I want you to come home. And he said, I can't come home. How am I going to come home? You know what I mean? I can't afford to get a charter flight out of here. It's like $6,000. So there's no way. I was like, if you're not here in like 3 hours, I'm gone. So I told him that the next day, or a couple days later, actually. And he's like, don't leave. I hung up the phone. That's how I was, because I was, I didn't trust anybody. Like, that's where it comes down to. I didn't trust anybody, and that whole marred part of myself from being abused and unable to do relationships and unable to handle things in life. That's the way my mom operated. I mean, she, kick out, get out, throw out. I was just kind of doing what I knew how to do, which was to be mean and hurtful. And in the meantime, hurt myself. But I decided that I couldn't trust him in my mind. And I thought, he's not here. He's not here for me. And I'm gone. Without realizing the guy can't even get home, in 3 hours. There's no way. He was so far north, he wouldn't have been able to get home for probably 24 hours. So that was my way of saying I'm going. Goodbye. And I did. I left. I went down to my brother's place, stayed there for a short time, a week or so. And within a short time, I was in Vancouver Island, cooking at a restaurant, at a hotel restaurant, at I think it was called Tinwis Lodge in Ucluelet, on Vancouver Island. So I was gone, and my feelings at that point were so screwed up I didn't, I probably was hormonal because of losing the baby. I was grieving. I was flipped out. And I loved Cecil. I knew I loved Cecil. But I didn't know how to handle anything at all. All I could think of doing was running. And that's what I did when I left New Mexico. Was basically just running. And I kind of had been running from relationships all my life. So, I wasn't surprised, right? And I told him, I said, no hard feelings. I talked to Cecil on the phone, and I said, no hard feelings. I mean, I love you, but I think it's for the best that we just separate. We're just done, right? He's like, well, I think it's for the best too. And he's like, but I'm sorry, I really loved you. And I said, I know you did, and I love you too. But I said, I don't think it's going to work out. So I was just determined that I was going to have to do this on my own. And so I stayed there and worked for not very long. I think it was until second week of April or whatever. And my mom had gotten sick and they were in New Mexico. My mom and dad, they had left and gone to Nova Scotia and then moved back and then drove back to New Mexico. My mom was in no shape to be taking trips like that. And but she wanted to go. She wanted to go back to New Mexico to see Kathy, I guess, before she passed away. So they went back, and she was dying, right? So when she got back there, so my dad phoned. He's like, well, we're back in New Mexico, but Barb is really sick, and she can't breathe, and I think we're gonna have to take her to the hospital. And I'm like, well, let me talk to her. So my dad put me on the phone with my mom, and I told her, I said, you better get Kathy. I said, you better get some oxygen or get to a hospital. My mom's like, they won't get me any oxygen. I said, well, put me back on the phone with him. So she did. I said, I told my sister, I said, you better, I said, unless you want mom to die right there in your house, you better get her some oxygen. Because she's going to die. My sister's like, I don't know where to get oxygen. I'm like, you better bloody figure it out. You make a phone call or get her to the hospital. Well, they finally did get her to the hospital, but it was too late. So then she was going to die. So my dad phones. He gets a bereavement flight. My brother actually gets a bereavement flight for me from Calgary down there. So I fly to Calgary. I fly down to New Mexico. I had to leave that job. I've got all my stuff with me because I've left that job. I'm not going back there. It's absolutely insane. It was absolutely insane. And I end up in New Mexico, in Albuquerque there, and I get to the hospital that night, and my mom is is almost in a coma. And I did get to see her for a couple of hours. We didn't spend much time talking to her because she was very sick, and she was gonna, she was just talking would have probably killed her. But all she kept saying was, "I was such a terrible mother. I was such a terrible mother. I was a horrible mother." And she would say, she did say when she first saw me, she said, "I'm sorry you lost the baby." She did say that. And she held my hand and rubbed my fingers, which is the first time she ever did anything like that in my lifetime. And I'm sitting there, and I told her, I said, I'm just going to tell you this, Mama. And I said, you have to know this is true. We've told you this before, but all of your children loved you very much. And I said, I'm going to speak for all of us. And because I did this, I already told you before. All of your children loved you very much. And we do. And we still do, the ones that are here. And I just wanted her to know that, And she was just sobbing. I was such a horrible mother. And which was breaking my heart, right? Because I loved my mom very much, right? So in the we decided to go get something to eat. My sister Irene, all she ever really thought about was food, booze, and gambling. So she's like, let's go get dinner, leave mom alone for a little while. So we did. I mean, I didn't care if we had dinner or not. And but we went and had supper and came back. My mom was in a coma. She never talked to us again. She wasn't able to. And it was just like, wow. So I mean, she passed away, and they finally pulled the plug because my dad wouldn't let them pull the plug for 3 days. But she was gone, and they said, look, she can't live. Even if she survives this, she's not going to make it. So they decided they better pull the plug. So they did, and she was gone. And I'm sitting at the hospital. We got to go and say goodbye after she was already gone, which was redundant and stupid. But anyway, so instead sat there, and I made my peace with her in the room there, and I went and sat outside the hospital. I did detail this in my books as well as my Born in Hell series, but I'm just bringing it up because it was such a horrible time. I had just lost my baby. I just lost my boyfriend, who I love very much, who I consider to be my husband, really. Um, my life partner. And I was bouncing around. Ended up in left Edmonton. Ended up in back in Sylvan Lake, back over to Vancouver Island, and back down over to Calgary, then back over to the States, bouncing around. And I was just very confused. I had no idea what the hell I was even doing. I just lost my baby. I was really pissed off about that. And the man that I love sitting up there north, and I'm down there and my mom's dead. But in the meantime, I'm thinking, it's kind of a relief came over me because I knew she would never be able to hurt me ever again. And I even told some people that were there at the hospital with us, Chris Becker, I said, she was my mom's friend, and I said, she'll never be able to hurt me ever again. It's a bit of a relief, right? And, nobody really got that, but I sure did. And, we went to the funeral and all that stuff. My dad, we all set that up and had the funeral, and then I went back to Calgary. And everybody was like, you need to stay here, don't go back up there. I'm like, no, my life is up there. I don't want to be down here. I love all you, my friends, I do have wonderful friends down there and I love them dearly, but it's too hard for me to be down there. It's too hard for me to be that person that I used to be, I needed to go get my life together. I needed to get my life straight, right? And so I moved back to Calgary, and I got a job. I got an apartment and a job. Luckily, I was able to stay with this lady who was a friend of my brother's, and his wife. They had been friends forever, and she was living in Calgary, and she had a pretty big place. She had an extra room. She says, "You can stay with me for a few weeks till you get a place." And I'm like, "That's cool." So, and I had a little bit of money, not much, but I stayed with her. I got a job right away cooking, and within 3 weeks I got my own place. And so I've got an apartment now in Calgary. Cecil's up in Edmonton, and I haven't talked to him at all. I didn't talk to him for a year. So I'm working. I did detail all this in a Born in Hell series. But just to make a long story short, we got back together. I phoned him and I said, I said, my mom passed away and I'm in Calgary, and he's like, well, I said, what? I said, how many ladies are in your life? He goes, well, one, just you. I've been waiting for you to call me. I'm like, and I believed him. I absolutely believe that that's true. I believe that he was waiting for me. And I believe in his heart that he knew I would call him. I do. And we got back together. He moved back down and he moved in. And, I told him, I laid it out on the line. I said, man, I'm sorry I left you, but you got to know where I'm coming from. You got to know what's wrong with me if we're going to do this relationship, I said, the reason I left is because I can't handle anything. And I need somebody who's going to be able to deal with the fact that I don't deal. And not abuse me, and not mistreat me and not force me to do something just because you think that's what I should do. I need somebody who's going to just be here for me and help me to get through this. I said, I really explained the abuse. I mean, I made him sit down and listen to me going on for about 2 hours about the abuse and what it did to me and all of the abuse, like the dysfunction and the drug abuse and my inability to cope as an adult, suicidal tendencies and everything. I had to tell him everything. I just made him listen to the whole thing. And then he told me his stuff. And he's like, well, he says, I will. I'll be good to you. I'll treat you right. I would never hurt you. And he's like, and he says, but you hurt me. Because he said, I wanted you to trust me because I'm a trustworthy person. And you didn't, and you just didn't even give me the benefit of the doubt. And you just laughed. He goes, I'm wondering, like, if we have another argument, you're going to give me, instead of 3 hours to get home, you're going to give me 5 hours. I said, no. I said, no. I'm kind of done with that. But I said, if we're going to hurt each other, there's the door. And I said, like, if you're going to hurt me, there's the door. And if I'm going to hurt you, I can go. The person who's at fault is going to have to go. Because I said, we need to love each other and we need to take really good care of each other. If we aren't going to make each other's life better, then we need to split right now. And we both agreed that we were going to do the right thing by each other, and we did. And we had a wonderful, wonderful marriage. And we tried to have children, and I couldn't have any more. That was it. That was my one shot. And because he said, let's, if we have them, we do. And I'm like, that's wonderful. And I never was able to get pregnant again. And, but that's all right. And life is life. So here, 2001, he gets sick, working up north. They don't know what's wrong with him. They ship him down by ambulance, well, actually, first of all, Star's helicopter, ambulance helicopter, down to Peace River Hospital, and then they transport him to Edmonton by ambulance. And then from Edmonton, he comes down in an ambulance down to Calgary, and he's sick. They don't know what's wrong with him. They're doing tests, trying to figure it out. And then they find out that he's terminally ill. He's got liver disease, and he's terminally ill. And it was, the diagnosis we got was on Valentine's Day, February 14th. We had to go to the doctor, and I was waiting in the car, and it was freezing cold. It was like minus 35, and really it's always almost minus 35 at that time of year. Really super cold, and I'm sitting in the car, just freezing my butt off. And I'm just waiting for him to come out, and he comes out, and he's like, kind of got this look on his face, like he wanted to cry, and I'm like, uh-oh, this is not good. And I said, what's wrong, honey? And he goes, I'm dying. And I'm like, oh my God. My world just turned upside down, my head was spinning, and I thought, I gotta drive us home, so I better pull it together. But I was like, that's a great Valentine's Day gift, isn't it? I said, I'm here for you, honey. Let's go home and get warm, and we can just work it out, and we can cry, and we can, So he was diagnosed 2 to 5 years. We had to go to Edmonton to do tests and stuff like that, and they talked to him about it, and they said, we see 2 to 5 years, but it could be much longer than that, depending on how you take care of yourself. If you don't drink and you eat healthier and take care of yourself, you could live a lot longer than that. Or you could live less than that. We don't know, right? So we said, well, we're going to do life, and we're going to do it as normal as possible. That was back in 2001. And we really didn't let it get us down. We were like, no, let's live each day as best we can, as they come, and then we don't have to worry about what's going to happen in the future. Every day we'll live as normally as possible, enjoy ourselves, and that's what we did. And that's why our relationship was so special, because we didn't sit around, crying the blues about this situation. I mean, he continued to get sicker and sicker. By 2010, he was practically dying. They said, you got about 2 months to live. You've got cancer. If this treatment isn't done, cobalt treatment, you're going to die. It's going to be a very short time. And we knew it because, he was really sick. And, as you can see by the photos, I'm talking through the photos here. As you can see through the photos, he was very, very sick. And they said, well, he's got a 50-50 chance. He could either make it or he's not. It's either going to kill his liver or it's going to kill the cancer, one or the other. So I went to the hospital, and I'm like, well, if God wants him to come home with me, then he will. And I just prayed and stayed in faith, and he did. He came home with me. And he was, we went 6 months later, the cancer was gone for his checkup. And he was still sick. He still had liver disease. But the thing is the cobalt killed the cancer. And I was like, that's awesome. So we got another 8 years. And it wasn't like it was 8 years of not hardship on his part, because he was very sick. But he hung in there like a trooper. And, he was a strong, strong man, that's for sure. And he just never let it get him down. He was funny. He was, we used to play Yahtzee for pennies, and he would always win. This is, always win. Once in a great while I'd win. Like 1 out of every 40 games I might win. So I'd always owe him like $12. Like it would all add up, for my penny a point thing, right? By the time it was done in a month, I was paying him like $70-$80 in Yahtzee money, right? I'd get mad. And he'd be like, you're a poor sport. I'm like, it's just because you win all the time. Of course I'm a poor sport. So we had fun. Like, I don't know, most people wouldn't have known that, right? We used to have fun just hanging out, and he loved treats. He loved ice cream. I'd make him these beautiful ice cream sundaes, and he'd just be in his glory. He just loved having a snack, like treats. His favorite thing to do was eat candy bars. He loved chocolate bars. So I always had to have like a whole huge stack of chocolate bars around for him. And I mean, he was just a neat guy. Like, he was so funny, and he loved the Blue Jays. He was a loyal fan of the Blue Jays, Toronto Blue Jays, baseball. He was a fan of the Flames, Calgary Flames hockey team, and he liked an American football team, and I can't remember which one it was. I don't know which one that was, but he loved sports, and he loved to watch sports. I'd watch sports with him. He was a sci-fi fan. Both of us were into science fiction. We both loved movies about space. So anytime there was a space movie, when we'd buy it or we'd rent it or whatever, and we were always watching movies, mainly space shows. And so he loved some of these real tearjerker movies too. He had a big heart. He wasn't afraid to show his heart, and I think that's what made him such a beautiful person. He wore his heart through his eyes, on his sleeve, like you could see his heart. He was just a really good man. And we had fun. We used to go do stuff whenever he felt like he could do it. His health was, deteriorating gradually all the time. He was just getting sicker. Sometimes he'd spend 6 months in the hospital. I'd be doing my blog talk radio shows, and, I'd be like, well, Cecil's still in the hospital. 3 months later, 6 months later, Cecil's still in the hospital. I'd have to go see him, so I'd drag over there twice a week or 3 times a week. And sometimes I had a car, sometimes I didn't. And, take the bus, and a couple of transfers later in minus 35 weather. And this is what you do, you know what I mean? This is what you do. Because, he was there for me. He was there for me, holding me, as I'm screaming and having night terrors from being abused as a child. And, he was there for me. He didn't run off and say, screw this, man, this chick's too messed up. And, he didn't leave me when I left him. His heart was with me, and when we got back together, he's like, I was waiting for you to call. I knew you'd call. He's like, I love you. And, that's just so special. I wish all of you could know that. So many people don't. And just a few weeks before he passed away, so the middle of July of 2018, his health started to go down, and we knew it. We knew it was getting close, because he was really having a hard time just functioning, like just standing up. He'd fall down. And we had home healthcare people checking in. We had nurses around. He was at home, and he ended up falling, and he had to go into the hospital just a few days before he passed away. But he was very cognitive. His cognitive faculties were still there, and but his body was giving out. And he told the nurse, the hospital person there, for the people that are going to die. He's paleo healthcare and all that. He said, I want to die at home. I don't want to die in the hospital. And they said, well, it's up to your wife, because she's the one that's going to have to be doing the administration of the morphine and taking care of you while you're passing away, right? And she has to be okay with that. And I was there, and he asked me, he says, would you do it? I said, yes, I would. I would do that for you, for sure. Whatever you want. I said, it's what you want. It's your journey to end this life. You have to be okay with what you want. I'm totally okay with whatever you want to do. And he said, I want to die at home. I don't want to die in the hospital. I just want it to be me and you. And I said, well, that's fine with me then. So they said, okay, we'll sign it up. We'll get everything over to your place, and there'll be a lady there that will be helping you, so you won't be alone completely. She'll be there for you, even a phone call away. But we'll show you how to do the morphine and how to administer and how to do it right. So I had to spend the day practicing, taking care of Cecil for his last morphine shot and all of this, and because I had to be the one to administer the morphine till he died, right? And they said, you're going to feel bad because you're going to give him the last shot and he's going to die. So they said, you're going to probably feel like you killed him. right? And they said, it's normal. You know, the person that gives the person the last shot is always the one that feels responsible. But, you know, all you're doing is being an angel of mercy, really. Because he's got to go, right? So you're just making it so that he doesn't suffer. That's all. So, and I gave him, I mean, you know, we spent the 3 days. He was here, and it was just me and him. Pretty much the last 36 hours, I'd say. You know, I had to have more morphine dropped off, and the lady that was helping us out, sort of like the helper lady for the paleo healthcare, she was coming just to make sure everything was okay. But she said, I'm going to leave you guys alone now. I think he's going to go. It won't be long. Probably, you know, within 24 hours, right? And she said, here's my phone number. You've got the numbers. You can call us. You can call me anytime, 24 hours a day. I will be here. Somebody will be here. You're not really on your own. But if everything goes well, this is what you do when he does pass away. So she gave me the instructions on what to do when he died, and who to call, this sort of stuff. So she says, don't panic, it's okay. And she says, you don't have to call right away. You can call a couple hours later. It's up to you. You can call very moment if you're more comfortable, or you can call a couple hours later. But once you call the funeral home, they will come and get the body, right? So she says, if you do want to spend a couple of hours with him, you know, or half an hour or whatever, to say your goodbyes, that's when you need to do it, before they come take him away, right? And I'm like, okay. So it was just me and him, and you know, it was through the night, and he would, if I left the room, because I was still smoking at the time, and he'd leave the room, and I'd leave the room because I thought he was sort of sleeping, right? And I'd come out and have a smoke break and a cry, because I needed to be able to let some of that emotion out. I didn't want to cry around him because I didn't want to bum him out. And I wanted to be support to him, not breaking down crying all the time, right? So I'd come out and have a smoke and cry, and while I was out here smoking and crying, he would be like, Lori, where are you? So I'd have to put my smoke out and go back in there. He didn't want me to leave him, see? He knew I wasn't there. So even though I thought he was sleeping, he actually knew I wasn't in the room. And, you know, it was through the night, you know, I just kept giving him his morphine shots. And finally he's like, just give me the last shot. Just give me the last shot. And I just gave him the shot, and just a normal shot. But it was one, I think he knew his heart couldn't take it much more. His lungs were starting to fill up, and he was going. But he was such a beautiful soul, you know. And we had a very wonderful spiritual experience. You know, he heard a knock on the door, which there was no knock on the door, but he could hear a knock on the door. He's like, there's somebody knocking. And I'm like, well, you better open it, hon, because if it's the Lord, you better let him in. We're both believers in Jesus Christ, right? And I am. And he said, okay, he reached up like he was opening the door, and he pulled like he was pulling it open, and he goes, Joshua. Well, that's the name of Jesus, and that's Jesus' real name, Yeshua. And so, and Cecil wouldn't have really known that, because I'm the one that studies biblical Hebrew and Greek and all that, right? And Latin. I study all the biblical languages. So, he wouldn't have known that. I don't know where he would have picked that up, but it was amazing. And he left. He left his body and his last breath, and I wanted to go with him at the time. You know, I was sitting there, and I was just praising God, because I know he's in heaven. And I was just like, I thought I was going to go too, but then our little cat meowed, and she came in the room to see what was going on, and she was standing there, and, you know, he was dying, and she was looking, and she was meowing, and I was like, who's going to look after the kitty cat if I go? You know, our little sweet cat. And so I stayed in my body. Right? I was about ready to leave my body. I thought I was going to die. I wanted to go with him is what it was. And so yeah, it was a horrible experience, even though that's just life. It was also the most important thing I could do for him, which was to be there for him, you know, to the end. Because I told him, I said, we're together to the end. And he said that. He said, I said, if I go first, you stick it out with me to the end. And and he said the same thing. He's like, well, you'll be with me to the end. So, he's in my heart, and he's never far away. One day we'll be back together again, I'm sure. But I just wanted, for anybody who knows Cecil and, his family who might be listening, um, friends who might catch this, he had a heart full of love for all of you, and you were on his mind. Before he passed away, he went through and he named all his people that he loved so dearly, and his sons, and his family, his sisters. And he said, I love them all. And I said, I know you do, honey. And they love you too. And I know that they'll see him again in heaven. So, it's my tribute for Cecil. It's hard to do. And I hope that, anybody listening, I hope that you'll find true love. I hope that you'll find somebody that is there for you to help you get through to the end, right? And if you find that person, don't you ever let them go. Don't ever let them go. Because true love is hard to find, let me tell you. And once you find it, you better hang on to it. So, thanks everybody for being here for me through the years. I've had so much great support from so many people. I wish I knew you, and I wish that, I wish I could do something for you. All I can do is keep you in my prayers and in my thoughts, and just know that you're all very special to me, and I love you all very much. I'll be around another day when I'm feeling a little bit better, and I'm just going to spend the day just thinking about my love and how much wonderful times we had together, and not the sad stuff, but the good stuff, right? God bless you all till the next time. We'll talk to you soon. Take good care of yourselves, everybody. I will too, I promise.